All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Praveen here. Very excited to have you all today with us for the session. Uh, we'll just give it like a minute as folks are kind of trickling in before we get started. Yeah. Uh, Sylvia, where are you based right now?
I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal.
Oh, okay. But you were in the US before, right? From what I could see, you studied there for a while.
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in the US. So originally from Miami, Florida, and then about a little over a year and a half ago now, crazy, time flies. I decided to move here, and for me, it was an experiment. So like a
Hmm.
quick backstory, back in May of the previous year is when I launched the beta for ad conversion. And it
Hmm.
was like arguably one of the busier months, especially in the beginning. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Lisbon for a month, and I stayed in a co-living. And I'm like, if I can make it work with the time zones, because that was my biggest concern. If I can make the time zones work and everything like that, then maybe there's something to more. And I went, had a great time. Beta went well. Everything worked out. And then from there, I was hooked. And then I went through the visa process, and yeah, I've been here since for over a year and a half now.
Got it. And if you don't mind me asking, why Lisbon, Portugal specifically, or any other city for that matter?
It's gonna sound lame, but I mean it's my story. I saw Lisbon on a YouTube video years ago, and it
Okay.
just it always like stuck with me of like how beautiful it was and the landscape and the scenery and everything. And for me, I love California weather. Like whenever I
Mhm.
have like especially when I used to work at Meditate, I would fly to San Francisco all the time. And I love that like San Francisco weather, cool, breezy, etc. And Lisbon is like a combination of Miami and San Francisco because you have like the cool California weather, no humidity, but you also
Mhm.
have like the year-long sun that I used to have from Miami. So it's like this nice blend between the two.
Got it. Got it. Understood. Understood. All right. I think we can get started. Hey, everyone. Really excited to host this session with Silvio, and thanks for dropping by and joining us for the session. We have a lot to cover, so I'll make this quick. Just by the way of introductions, my name is Praveen. I'm one of the founders of Factors.ai. Factors.ai is a 4-year-old ABM and account analytics platform. We work with over 600 customers globally right now across SaaS, IT services, and other B2B companies. Uh, and very excited to have Silvio today here with us. Silvio, over to you for a very quick intro.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Silvio Perez. I'm the founder and CEO of Ad Conversion. So at Ad Conversion, we are a digital advertising academy and agency. On the academy side, we have about 5,000 plus B2B marketers right now taking our courses on topics like LinkedIn ads, Google ads. We just launched Red Ads on Monday and a few other ones. And then we also have the community where we dive deeper into these topics and really nerd out on the latest and greatest. And then on the agency side of our business, we're managing over $3 million a month in ad spend for B2B SaaS brands, sales-led, product-led, hybrid models as well, multiple industries. So everything ads is really like our zone of genius and the stuff that we go deep on.
Got it. Curious, Silvio, you mentioned digital advertising, digital marketing academy first and agency later. And that's something that I've noticed about you as well, that you share a lot of content. And I've been following your content for a while. And generally, you've been quite generous with your playbooks and what you learn as you're going through. So, how are you thinking about this? Is it academy first and then agency? And why not the reverse, right? So,
Yeah, so for me, it's very much academy first and then agency because for me, my big vision is I want to create the go-to place to learn how to run ads in the world. So one place you can go master ads from beginner to advanced, not get ripped off in the process. Like me learning ads and coming up through my personal journey, it was a struggle. And like when I would talk to my friends, I'd be like, "How did you learn to run ads?" And it was like this crazy FBI suspect board of like, you got to go to this place, and then you got to go here, and then you got to do this, and da da da. You know what I mean? There wasn't like this one spot. So for me, I'm very much like mission driven. So like I get inspired by brands like Patagonia and these types of ones that like they use business as a force for good to do something, which is why we don't charge anything for our courses. I always say like I'm either the smartest person in the world or the dumbest. Like time will tell, you know. But like it's very much that's first for me. And then the agency is I very much view it as like R&D. It's a lab, and it's this research and development lab where we go deep. We're running ads across 6 platforms. We're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We take those learnings and then we push it into the academy. And it's kind of like this flywheel between the two units. My sound cut out 1 sec. Sorry.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh,
My
okay.
bad. So
Cool.
when you started out, did you start out with the agency first, or the academy?
Started with the academy first, and
Okay.
I was just consulting in the beginning, so managing a few clients, and the basically around August of 2023, I was like I had the realization where I'm like, if I want to grow this big vision, because like for me, ad conversion is very much like when I left metadata, I was like, what's something that I could see myself doing over the next 10, 15 years and like really
Mhm.
build something bigger than myself. Like for me, that's like, I'm not so much trying to like build and sell, et cetera. I really want to build something like, again, like the go-to place. Like that's a big mission, you know, and create these learning experiences across these verticals. So for me, I was like, I constructed that and I was like, oh man, well, if I'm doing this and I have a community and I'm charging this and et cetera, I'm like, oh, I'm set. Like, you know, because I'm a teacher at heart. So very much started with the academy first. And then once I realized like the agency is actually an unlock because viewing it from the frame of like R&D, you know, like I'm not trying to build the biggest agency in the world. Like I just want a super high quality team. We go super deep with the clients that we have. And again, it's R&D, you know what I mean? It's this lab. Once I made that connection in my mind, then I was like, okay, there's a purpose here. Let's build this agency up. And then I think at this point, it's just reminding myself on why I did it, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of more revenue for more revenue and, you know, like all these things that I'm sure we can relate on.
Yeah, onboarding just more and more customers and 50% growth every year, or whatever that metric is, right? And at some point, you just stop having fun and enjoying the process, I guess.
Totally.
Okay, so dialing back, Silvio. So you said you were head of performance marketing. I saw you were head of product innovation at Metadata as well. And you know, at Metadata, I presume you were working with a whole bunch of companies, helping them scale their ads. And if I remember right, it was during the COVID time, just before or after, right? So
Yep.
you've seen this for the last 5 to 8 years now. How have you seen B2B marketing evolve, right? Obviously, at least I've seen like sort of shifts and changes in terms of how people think about it. But I think you've had a much more sort of closer sort of point of view, working with a lot of customers in the trenches. So how have you seen the thought processes evolve, and where are we right now?
Mm. It's been a whirlwind. So early on, I remember it was very much lead gen, you know, predictable revenue, Salesforce playbook, you know, drive a drive a bunch of leads, top of funnel, content downloads, sales nurtures the leads, follow-ups with the leads, BDR AE structure. And it was very much that playbook. Then people started diving deeper and, you know, doing the math and realizing, wait a second, the amount of MQLs we're driving to turn into ops, it's actually like horrendous. We should probably do
Yeah.
something better. We might be better off just like ungating the content and just getting in front of as many accounts possible. Because if you actually factor in not just the cost per lead, but the cost per actual consumption, meaning maybe you got 500 people to download the ebook, but there's even a fraction of that actually read the ebook. So people put two and two together. Big shout out to Chris Walker, you know, who like started that movement. And essentially people dig deeper and they're like, let's ungate the content, focus more on consumption of the content, promote as much good content in feed as we can, based on building brand affinity and trust and positioning ourselves as the solution to their problems. People will make two and two together when they're ready, especially because we're dealing with long, complex sales cycles. And that's kind of the demand gen movement that we've seen. And now finally, I think that's not good enough. And I don't think it ever was. It's one of those things that it's like, it sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's few and far between. It's very hard to do ungated in the demand gen playbook effectively at scale. Like what a lot of people don't realize is like the brands that you admire that you see on LinkedIn that are running this well, they have built media machines internally. They also have really strong points of view where they can actually capture interest and attention and create that framing around them as the authority. That's really hard to do. You know, there's a lot of prerequisites that you have to get right. So I think a lot of people shifted towards this. They realized like it's not enough to just push content and feed. Like we need to create opportunities for sales to reach out and accelerate the process, right? And now I think we've kind of shifted into this world of like signal-based, ABM and signal-based demand gen and signals basically, where now it's you're using ads and you're using content as a way to elicit signals from people in the dark. So based on those signals, you can then make inferences, right? So for context, somebody that visited your pricing page or your case study page, they're researching you, right? And you're able to figure that out. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to reach out to them on LinkedIn if you're a BDR or an AE, or send them an email, etc. So I think we're kind of shifting more now towards this. And one thing that we're doing with our clients is we're very much like all into the signal-based approach, but we're also kind of moving a little bit towards the pendulum as well, as like back to lead gen, but intentional lead gen, where we are using offers strategically to get people to raise their hand from the shadows, like actually explicit real buying intent, which I feel like that could be a whole webinar in itself, and I'm sure we're gonna like dive more into that. But that's kind of like the hierarchy that I've seen of like where we're at right now. And then there's also like I would say like a shift too in terms of ads themselves. Like back in the day, it was very much algorithmic bidding, going broad, letting AI do a lot of the optimizations for you from a B2B context. This is very much still the world that B2C operates in, and it works for them. But for B2B, we're interested in person and company, so it's a little bit harder. So we went from that. Then people got hyper obsessed with technology and targeting. I was part of that in the metadata boom. And everybody wanted to use tools like metadata or SayPrimer, et cetera, like so that they can get more specific with their targeting. And I think now finally in this like third phase, and a lot of people are still not here yet, but the people that I see winning on a big scale are getting there, is they're realizing the biggest advantage that you have is your data, your creative, and your offer. And they're doing a lot more on optimizing those three things to really win with paid today.
Got it. So I have a couple of follow-on questions, Surya. So you mentioned the whole lead gen to demand gen to now somewhere in between, which is a signal-based marketing approach. Obviously, our product actually plays in that category in terms of helping you do better marketing by consolidating all of these signals. But if I were to stick to the demand gen phase, right? I thought the primary point of view was give as much value as possible, ungate content, give it in the feed, or even if people come to the website, why would you gate it? And I remember conversations around, yeah, you're getting like an email ID which you can get from Zoom Info, right? Like, what's the big deal, right? So the idea was give everything for free, and the expectation was that people would come inbound and say, I want to talk to your sales team, right? If you do all of this well, your inbound volumes would be so high, which is people coming in and saying, I really want to talk to you, that your sales team would never have to do outbound, right? Or some, I'm probably exaggerating or pushing it to a limit, but the idea was this, that if all of marketing focused on just education, you wouldn't have to worry about capturing leads. Now, where did that kind of not scale? Was it more about creating that many offers, or is it that despite the education, you know, people don't just come inbound and think about you as the first option when they are in a buying cycle? So, where exactly did the assumption not really work out in your view?
It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And it's not that the philosophy is flawed, it's the execution is flawed. So where it doesn't work out is you want to substantiate this approach. Well, like if we break that down, because like to create value is is linked to content, right? Because content allows you to create results in advance. It allows you to create an impression on someone. You can help them, right? Help them solve a problem. You create results in advance. So that gives you an opportunity to quote unquote add value. The challenge is when you really break down what this looks like at scale, you're talking about different themes of content. So product marketing content, social proof content, thought leadership content. These are all different buckets of content where if you're doing this at scale, this means like at least on a monthly basis, you are refreshing these different themes of content, right? And most companies, they don't have the content chops to be able to substantiate that. So I think that's where a lot of people fall off because they're just running, they're taking the ebooks that weren't working with lead gen, they're ungating it, and then they're pushing it to their accounts, and then they're saying, "Oh, I'm gonna pray and hope," like I'm building brand affinity and trust. They wait 6 months, and that supposed pipeline increase never came, and they're like SOL, right? I think the other place where this doesn't work in practice is where people are like, I'm all in, I want to do demand gen, I believe in it. But the way leadership gives them credit is based on a lead association.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if you have the motivation, you don't have the buy-in. And if you don't have the buy-in, then it's full stop, right? Because even if you created that net impact, you're not going to get credit for it. If you're not going to get credit for it, then ultimately you're not going to get a raise, your job's on the line, or like all these bad things. So I think those are the two things that come to my mind in terms of like what actually prevents people from making that happen. And this is why it's so important, which I know we're going to talk about later. When you are activating different strategies across the buyer's journey, you need to be thinking about what are the different leading and lagging KPIs that I can control to the best of my ability so that I don't have to wait 6 months to know, like, is this working or not? And hopefully I can have a much better sense after, a month maximum, if we're at least heading in the right direction. And I always say, like, if you're not measuring, you're gambling. And at the end of the day, like, we're here, and the best advertisers think like investors and they execute like scientists. Like, we're here making methodical decisions, and we are measuring our returns just like an investor in terms of like how they're actually impacting our bottom line.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. In fact, one of my customers, like, they're selling a SaaS product with, I think, a sticker price, like the minimum price would be like $250,000 with multiple modules going up to like $1 million, right? And like, I was speaking to the marketing team there, they are only allowed to run lead gen ads. Like, that's it. They just can't do anything else because the internal measurement framework is even now associated with, did you get a lead, and then did that lead become associated with an opportunity, right? That's how you have to justify your few $1 million that you're putting in LinkedIn or any other channel, right? And I think that extreme is obviously bad. I think even in the other extreme, I think I like what you said of intentional sort of lead gen and engineering offers so that there are some points of intervention that a sales team can kind of step in. And the sales team's pitch need not be a demo at that point, right? It could be more educational content. It could be just establishing a connect, right? It could be like sort of softer ways even for a sales team to kind of connect with a prospect. And creating those moments, obviously with offers that are of good quality, definitely makes sense. Let's move on. I know we have a lot to cover. So you mentioned that in your sort of thought process, right? So rather than like the spray and pray model, you should move to signal based sort of sequencing. Can you just go deeper into what your philosophy is and how do you actually set it up for your customers?
So I think about signals as just prioritization. That's it. So just like taking a step back, you have been given this task, right? I'm assuming if you guys are operating off signals, for the most part, you're in the account-based world, but the same can also be true for product-led companies. But let's just, for the context of today's viewers, we're talking ABM, sales-led models, probably upper mid-market enterprise. So essentially, you are trying to get after a specific person at a specific company. So step one is, okay, I've got this TAM that I've created, right? This target account list. Maybe for you in practice, you're like, I've got my tier 1 accounts, my tier 2s, my tier 3s. That's great. And that's a good starting point, especially if you source the list in a very responsible way. And then from there, usually what you would do is you would go to market, you would launch campaigns against it, and you would start to actually try to, create that exposure, whether that's ungated, et cetera, but you would go to market with that. Now with signals, and the way I think about it, like I said, it's just prioritization. Is now what you want to do is you want to look at the list. So you're like, okay, I've got 1,000 companies that matter to me. Using signals now, you can filter that list further down. So for example, like maybe of those 1,000 companies, there's 50 of them right now that were checking out your pricing and case study page. We should probably start with those guys, right? Like the opportunity for them to convert into revenue faster, I think we can all make the assumption that it's more likely, right? Based on the actions, the signals that we received. Another example is like, oh, we've got this list of 1,000 companies. How many of those people in those companies have past champions that are now working at them that we used to work with, right? That were a customer of ours in the past. So now we can segment it down further from 1,000 to maybe 500 or 300. And the good thing is when you're running LinkedIn ads, and there's ways you can target these people outside of LinkedIn, but most of us here right now, I'm assuming you're on LinkedIn, which most B2Bs are. When you're running LinkedIn ads, you are paying a premium upfront. It is the cost of running ads on LinkedIn. Welcome to the game. And the difference with LinkedIn ads versus Meta ads, YouTube ads, Twitter ads is with LinkedIn, you are not trying to burn the ocean. I mean, just go broad and like try to rack up as much frequency as you can. What you're trying to do is you are trying to burn the pond. You are trying to become so big to a very small group of people that in their mind, they're like, this brand is everywhere. Like they must be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in ads, right? And depending on the size of that list, maybe you're not even close to that, right? You probably aren't. But in their mind and their perception, they're just like, holy crap, I cannot escape you, right? And hopefully you're creating a positive experience, right? It's like Spider-Man, great power comes great responsibility, you know? So it's a double-edged sword. But all in all, signals is a way of prioritizing, right? So when you're looking at your accounts, you can then layer signals on top of it for further prioritization. And then not only prioritization, but also activation. So really like sales exists to help, or marketing exists to help sales, like fundamentally, right? It's a team sport, right? I think about it as like the baton pass, right? Like, if you're in the Olympics, you're running and you want to pass the baton to your partner, right? And one way you can help sales is, of course, like generating a lead. With signals now, you also have the ability to help sales through these hidden engagements of what people are doing. So now what you're doing, because getting outbound to work well, the hardest thing is relevance and timing. Arguably, timing is harder. So signals allow you not only to prioritize your ad spend efforts and try to drive a higher ROAS in the short term, but it also allows your sales team to get off the bench and get involved. So now they can activate, they can reach out. And if you're dealing with 3 to 36 month sales cycles and you're on the tail end of that, you can hopefully now try to actually add value. And if you have a good key account management motion, get into the accounts and actually start a real conversation and start to nurture that relationship.
Got it. So 2 points that I kind of immediately took away. I think one is for your small set of audience or for a small niche, just be everywhere, right? Like just ensure that you're able to drive enough recall, which what I see is that for most of the customers that we work with, as I mentioned, we work with over 600 customers. I see that they don't really plan that out well. So like this evening, I was speaking to a customer. They have a list of 7,000 target accounts to go after, and their monthly budget on LinkedIn is $5,000. And I was like, that math doesn't work, right? Like it's practically possible that you can upload a list of 7,000 companies, put a budget of $5,000, something would happen, but it is not a deliberate winning strategy where you're spreading yourself so thin that a few accounts would see like 10 impressions, 5 impressions from you, right? So where do you think people get that wrong? Like, is it like, yeah, somebody would see an ad and maybe even like those 2 3 ads will leave an impression and they'll just come by and immediately kind of talk to us? Is that how it is, or do you think people just don't think about it? It's just the most logical action to say there is a budget, I need to upload a list of companies. These two things are disconnected in their mind, so they don't really plan out how much exposure will I get per account.
I think most people just don't think about it. It's an expertise gap, they, like to give them credit. Most of these people are super busy. They're doing multiple things. They're stressed. They're being overworked. They're in a series A or whatever, series B. Like they're just trying to work so hard to get to that first round, or vice versa. They're in a larger company, but they're coasting. It doesn't matter that much. They kind of have like that legacy. But all in all, I think it's an expertise challenge. They just don't know. No one teaches you this stuff, right? Until ad conversion, subtle plug. But no one teaches you this stuff, so you don't know any better. And it's interesting because like when you're forecasting a LinkedIn ads budget, for example, or an ABM budget for that matter, to be channel agnostic here because the same fundamentals apply. This is where things like CPM, frequency, audience penetration, like actually start to matter. This is when they go from like these buzzwords and like vanity metrics that no one cares about to like, oh, wait a second, this is actually a core piece of information in terms of like how we actually allocate our budget and fundamentally our strategy. But generally speaking, for everyone listening, like going back to the burn the pond analogy, really try to index like to be as, and not to nerd out too hard here because I know I'm going everywhere, but like one of my favorite concepts with advertising that like just fascinates me is like advertising is just guaranteed distribution. It's just guaranteed awareness, right? What you make of it comes down to your strategy. And with ads, you have the ability to literally manufacture celebrity. Like you can become famous, quote unquote, to a very selective group of people, and that's something that's always fascinated me. And it's like, if you're getting in front of the right people, which is fundamentally the easy part, especially now with LinkedIn, I think we're all spoiled now. Like I think back in the day of like Claude Hopkins, the guy who invented the coupon, and like, how did he get in front of his ICP? You know what I mean? He didn't have LinkedIn. He was, it wasn't even direct mail. It was like just going to stores and putting placements up in the store. Like, how did they get in front of their ICP? I'm nerding out now, but we have this like amazing technology, and it's like, if you're getting in front of the right person, which if you're not, like, you should fix that. That's really easy. And they're not responding in the way you want, then that means you fundamentally have a strategy issue, right? Where your offer and the audience and your copy and the combination of those elements is not resonating. And the solution is not throw more tech at it or throw more budget at it. The solution is fix the fundamentals 9 times out of 10.
Got it. Now, I think that whole point of being a lot more deliberate about the list of accounts, how much can you effectively reach, and just being in front of them, even if it is a smaller audience, rather than spreading yourself like so thin that it becomes inconsequential. I think those are very intuitive, but I would still say rarely sort of well implemented. But let's move on. I would love to hear, Silvio, about your framework in detail. So you talked to us about TAM, you talked to us about signals and how you use it for prioritization. But yeah, what is the sort of superstructure and the fundamentals that you kind of leverage for your customers?
Yeah, 100%. I can share my screen and go through it for everyone here. So I'm going to share here, and I've got this monitor here with my slides. So I promise you guys, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just looking at the screen here. So let me share here. Hopefully it goes well. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. All right, cool. We did it. We did it, guys. No tech problems. So before I get into this framework, it's called the 5 stages model. It's something that we created at Conversion, and it's something that I teach in our Building a Paid Media Program course. Essentially, I want to just first talk about like full funnel. Why should you care? Is it just a buzzword? And how does it relate to like traditional models like tofu, mofu, bofu? So at the end of the day, I think we all can agree that you really don't know where people are at in their buying decision, right? We have forms of targeting that allow us to make inferences based on, whether it's contextual, things that people have looked at, the types of content they're browsing, or behavioral, right? Based on past actions they've made and how they've interacted with your brand. Fundamentally speaking, you have these 2 buckets of like targeting types. But ultimately, the difference of somebody going from unaware to product aware could be the span of 10 minutes. If they're watching a webinar, in that 10-minute period, they could go from unaware to product aware. It could be the difference of 6 months where they go from unaware to product aware, right? So the reason why we use these models is we use these models to plan. to help us plan to create the most effective experience that we can possible. The analogy that I like to use is like, imagine you had a storefront and you wanted to attract people into your storefront. Are you, just because you don't really know where people are at, like when they're walking down the street and what's going on in their head, you're not going to do anything to try to attract them into your storefront? No, right? Like that's silly. Instead, what are you going to do? You're going to think about those people deeply. Like, what are the kinds of people that are walking across my storefront, right? What are the things that they care about? Like, what are their income ranges like? What do they do for a living? What are they interested in, right? And you're going to take all this information and then you are going to try to derive a strategy. A strategy is just a fancy way of saying a plan, right? And for you, you're going to create a framework to help you devise that strategy. And really, you do this from the place not to manipulate so that, hey, I'm going to get as many people to buy. You do it from the place of, I want to create a great experience for them so that they feel like going into my storefront is the best choice for them. Because fundamentally, if you have a great product, it actually is. So with that being in mind, the most common framework is tofu, mofu, bofu. And the reason why this framework is so good is because it's simple. And tofu is the top of the funnel. This is awareness, right? You're getting people who are unaware. They might not even be problem aware. And you're getting these people who've never heard of you before. You've gotten them to be somewhat familiar. Now they move to mofu, the middle of the funnel, where they're engaged to some extent, but they're not ready to make a purchase. And now from there, you're trying to activate these mofu people into bofu, bottom of the funnel, where you try to drive that first conversion. The downside with tofu, mofu, bofu, I think it's a great model for 80% of companies. But when it comes to B2B specifically, I don't think it's the best model. The reason why is because it only focuses up until the point of the first conversion. And the difference with the B2B and B2C is B2B doesn't end after the first conversion. It actually just starts, right? So with B2C, it's like the first conversion is a product purchase, right? Or it's a phone call to your business. With B2B, the first conversion is a lead. And then God bless if that lead becomes an MQL, an SQL, an op, all of that happens past that first point of conversion. So this model doesn't work as well as something like the 5 stages model, which just allows you to visualize and see across all of the 5 stages in a B2B context, where can I actually stand up campaigns and try to make a meaningful impact? In addition to that, the way we measure these different stages is not equal, right? Even if I was talking tofu, mofu, bofu, you're not going to measure tofu the same way you're going to measure bofu, right? The same is true here. You're not going to measure create, which is all about building brand affinity and trust, the same way that you would measure capture. So that is the quick fundamental difference between the two, just to give everyone some context on what we're going to unpack further.
Got it. So what are these 5 stages? Let's just quickly dive into that.
Yes, good question, and it is going to be next in the slides here. So high level, it's create, capture, accelerate, activate, revive, expand. So for context, create is all about building brand affinity and trust. I love framing it from that perspective. Brand affinity and trust. It is to build trust and affinity. Affinity means to like. It is a much level deeper than when you think tofu, awareness. I served an impression, they are aware. No, they're not aware, right? And that actually echoes your point earlier, Praveen, around you have 7,000 accounts and a $5,000 budget. How are you really going to build brand affinity and trust, right? You need a certain level of frequency and exposure to even be eligible for that. That's the first stage. The second stage is all around capture. This is what most people think about when they run ads, is just capture, right? You're going after solution aware, product aware individuals. This is usually done on like channels where there's already existing intent, like Google search or paid review sites or remarketing. But essentially, you are trying to convert interest from these buyers that are in market, right? They're actively looking for a solution to their problems. And then from there, the next phase will vary depending on your sales model. So if you're sales led, it'll be accelerate. If you're product led, it'll be activate. And accelerate is all about, now that you've gotten the deal, congratulations. But depending on your sales cycle, it could take a long time for that deal to actually convert. So now in the accelerate phase, we are running ads to open opportunities, and we are trying to expedite the process. So, and I'll go into examples in all these different stages for you guys later, just to be mindful of time. But essentially what you're trying to do in the accelerate phase is you're trying to reinforce social proof. You're trying to answer objections. you are trying to build credibility, and you are trying to position yourself as the sure thing. Because the difference between a sale closing and not closing is ultimately it's the level of certainty that the person has with your product and the decision they're going to make. The more certain you can make someone, the more easy it is going to be to convert them, right? And there's different ways we can tip the scale in terms of perceived value and risk, so we can increase the certainty with the user or the prospect. And then activate, if you're product led, is all about, now that you've gotten all of these free trials into your product, congratulations, but free trials don't pay the bills. How do we actually move them from a free trial user, or if you're using a freemium model, a free user, into an actual paid user where they're using our product? And then the next one is revive. So this is, you had deals in the past, you did not close one them for whatever the reason might be, timing, competitors, etc. How can we get those deals back into the fold? And then finally is expand, is how do we drive more revenue from existing customers? And generally speaking, when I'm talking to people and I'm saying, hey, if you want to drive ROI as fast as humanly possible, it is much easier to go from the bottom up to drive ROI than start from the top down. So for context, maybe you only have 30 open opportunities. What is that going to cost you from a budget perspective to get in front of 30 open opportunities than 30,000 accounts? It's night and day, right? And in addition to that, like, these 30 opportunities are already in the sales process. So like getting them from, you're already a few steps ahead, right? So getting them to actually go over the finish line is much greater. So again, these things, these, like, all these aha moments, these ideas, these possibilities would not be possible if you weren't looking at the entire customer journey of where you could actually make an impact. And that is predicated on having a good framework to help you see things that you wouldn't otherwise see.
No, I completely agree, Silvio. But one challenge that I have is even kind of, uh, you know, uh, driving and like the awareness about this framework, right? It is so contingent on the internal marketing philosophies at these companies, right? At most companies that I work with as well. For example, like in many cases, opportunity acceleration is um, not as interesting because it's not a marketing KPI. Like, they're like, once the opportunity is created, marketing's role kind of ends over there. And it is an incentive problem, right? Like if you measure marketing that way, then you would end up spending majority of your budget on create and capture, right? And between create and capture as well, capture is obviously where most KPIs are indexed. And hence that's why 80-90% of the budget goes into capture, remaining goes into create. And at least my experience is that the last three buckets get very little. It is counterintuitive, as you said, that your highest ROI for the business would come from spending on those last three buckets. But then the way measurement is set up, OKRs are set up, is that expansion is an account management, customer success sort of objective. They're speaking to customers every day, so they will drive expansion over there. And the ROI for that is the sort of incentive program for the account management function. And then opportunity acceleration in a sales led model, keeping aside product led for a minute, is largely why sales teams are kind of calmed down on revenue, right? And then marketing kind of becomes like, yeah, up until the point of opportunity creation. Now, I agree that it is probably not good for the business to think of it that way, but I still see a lot of my customers actually operate in that zone. So do you really have to kind of convince people about this methodology? Do you see that that's something that you have spent a lot of time on?
Yeah, for us on the agency, one of the things we do is we build 12-month strategic roadmaps with all of our customers, and it's predicated on this model. So yeah, there's a lot of education that has to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, like, we're here to advise, and ultimately it's the business's decision on how they want to move forward. But this is where, when you do the strategy process and you put together the forecast, you have to take these things into consideration. The way we like to frame it is we think about it as a video game. And every time we take on a new client, we've entered a new game. The same is true when you're working in-house and you're running ads for a company, or you're working demand gen in a company. You've entered a game. And this game has a set of rules on like how they determine success or failure. And there is a different final boss that you must conquer. And getting that context of how the game is ran and how you can best optimize yourself to win that game. Ultimately, leadership's job is to set the conditions of the game. Now, if you're winning the game and it's not leveling up the business, then that's a leadership problem, you know, and obviously like you should surface these things to them, etc. But ultimately it is going to be a losing battle. Like it's really hard. Like, and that's where like we all struggle with buy-in and all these things. And this is where you can run like pilots and stuff like this. But fundamentally, it goes back to certainty. You know, the same is true in a sales process. The same is true in terms of convincing people. Like the more certain you can make leadership, the more likely they'll be, right? So, anywho, but yeah, my experience is the same. Most people are focused on create and capture, and if that's where you're at, that's so totally fine. You know, let's maximize that. Let's do it right. I think the problem is most people are forced to focus on create and capture. They're not doing it that right, and then they're asking to do these other things. You know what I mean? It's like you have to earn that credibility first and get those wins. And once you do that, you'll get more leniency and more trust to test some of these other things as well.
Got it. Yeah, let's move on. I think we discussed the overall problem of incentives and KPIs at length. Yeah, let's move on.
Sure. So moving on. So the scale framework is the repeatable process for building your paid media program from start to finish. So when I was putting together the building a paid media program course, it was arguably the hardest course I've ever had to make. It was our first course and the hardest course. And I kind of associate that course with like the example of like, it's like a kid, you know, like a kid doesn't want their vegetables, but it's what you need. And I kind of think of the building a paid media program course that way. These are the vegetables that you need that will make everything else easier or relevant, right? And then the dessert is like the LinkedIn ads course, our Reddit ads course that just launched, the Google ads course. Like these are all like the, you know, like the really nice desserts that everybody wants to eat, but nobody wants the vegetables. And the scale framework essentially is the process of how do you take a company from absolute zero to hero, right? To go from no program to scaling across channels, confidence in reporting, like really having a solid end-to-end system. So I'll break down each one of these because it's an acronym and they stand for different things. So the S in the scale framework stands for strategize. So we talked a lot about this just now with the 5 stages model, right? And using the 5 stages model to actually figure out what is my strategy, right? And you can see here, this is an example template and we shared in our course, but basically you can see here, you can map out what are my leading KPIs and my lagging KPIs for each stage. So for context, if I'm focusing on building brand affinity and trust, and I'm going account based, my leading KPI might be engagements by account, right? How many accounts are actually engaging and taking the action that I want? My lagging KPI might be something like blended SQOs. So blended meaning paid and organic. So because not everything's going to last touch from ads, right? So you're measuring the halo effect or influence to see, hey, are we actually driving the needle, right? And then you can make the assumption, well, if I'm, and the way I like to think about this too, just to like give people another frame, is think about leading KPIs. So I had a stint in the product world, so I definitely have like a product mindset. And in the product world, the way we think about this is we call them proxy metrics. So for context, like Netflix, one of their core KPIs is watch time, right? Their assumption is the more people who watch on Netflix, the more likely that are renew a subscription, etc. So watch time is the lagging KPI, right? For them, leading KPIs or proxy metrics that the product team looks at are things like click-through rate of their different selections, right? Of their episodes and their shows. If you notice and you really pay attention, you'll notice they're split testing the covers of their movies and their shows all the time. And they're basically trying to drive a higher click-through rate because if you don't click the thing in the first place, you're never going to watch it, right? In addition to that, they're also tracking how many people search things on Netflix and actually find something that they're looking for. So how many searches result in an actual click? These are all examples of leading KPIs, proxy metrics that they use to influence the lagging thing that they care about, which is watch time. The same is true in a B2B and advertising perspective, right? You do not need to wait 6 months to know if your ungated strategy is working or not. Like, you have to get creative, and it's very much a game of trial and error, and anyone in the product world will tell you the same. You're very much trialing and erroring on the proxy metrics and the leading KPIs to see what, once you find a good correlation. And essentially you're using these signals to try to move and actually drive the outcome that you care about, right? So anywho, this is leading lagging KPIs by stage. Capture is much more straightforward. The leading KPI might be something as simple as like cost per lead. The lagging KPI, pipe to spend revenue, right? Because it's dollars in, dollars out. Something with accelerate and activate. Your leading KPI might be like something like engagement by account as well, but your lagging KPI might be like average win rates, sales cycle length, things like this. You know, it takes longer to manifest. Revive, it might be on the front end, leads cost per lead. Lagging might be ops created or ops revived, right? So once you have this framework, now you can start to think, okay, how am I going to measure success, which already informs like future reporting and conversion tracking, but then also how am I going to target them? So for context, like here in this hypothetical example, I'm going to do one-to-one strategic ABM campaigns, and I'm going to go really focus. Like this 5K is going to be like diluted across a very handful of accounts, right? And I really want to, again, burn the pond, be massive to these companies, because if just one of those company closes, I just paid for my ad budget for the rest of the year, right? And in addition to that, like, you nailed targeting because the impression itself is valuable. If you don't look at your targeting and you get like giddy where you're like, ah, yeah, that's a good company, that's a good company, that's a good company, that's a good company, then you need to optimize that because the impression itself should be valuable. So then from there, you can map this out. So you can map your targeting and your exclusions. So for context, like targeting, these are the things you want to show up for, and the exclusions are the things you want to block. So from here, you can start to orchestrate this experience. So for context, here in the create stage, I can exclude existing customers. I can exclude my remarketing audiences. I can exclude different lists so that I'm only going after the cold of the cold of the cold, right? Like brand new people that have not entered my vicinity or my world as based on my, my current level of reporting and tracking. And then from there, now you can start to orchestrate this experience for people so that they can move through your artificial experience, right? To get them into that storefront that you're creating. Now, where people go wrong, and we were talking about this before we went live, anything in excess is usually bad. I think we can all agree on that, right? There's a dichotomy, right? So for context, if you drive too fast on the highway, that's really bad. That's dangerous. But if you drive too slow, that's also very dangerous. There's always somewhere in the middle that is usually the truth, and that's where it lies. And that's been my experience. So for context, like where people go wrong when they think about these frameworks is they're like, I'm going to launch an ad to my list of accounts. And then if they see the ad, and then they watch this percentage of the video, then I'm going to show them this specific ad. And then if they engage with that specific ad, then I'm going to show them this specific ad. That's too much orchestration. And it's terrible from a practicality perspective because every corresponding audience gets dramatically lower in terms of size, right? In addition to that, you're assuming you're going to be right 3 out of 3 times. I'm assuming 25% consumption of the first touch will make sure that they're ready for the second touch. And then whatever that second touch is, that'll make them ready for the third touch. I don't know about you, but I'm very bad at guessing. So really, instead, what you're doing is you're creating this system. You're pushing this content out to them depending on your strategy. You're seeing how the market responds, right? So for example, I promoted a webinar to my cold accounts here in the create layer. If they decide to engage with the ad or they decide to opt in, I'm not assuming anymore. Like they decided to take that action, right? Now, based on that, I can start to make some inferences and move them to the next stage. The same is true in remarketing. I think about remarketing as the newsletter that everyone is subscribed to, but they didn't opt into or give consent. So you have this newsletter, right? And if you think about like, what are the best newsletters like? They are a combination of offers and content. So you want to have this newsletter mentality where you're continuing to nurture the list, create a great experience through the different types of content that you're offering, and also providing offers. And you're just showcasing all this different stuff. And then they're deciding to choose what they want to do, right? They decided to click on your demo ad, go to your page, start filling out your form, and then abandon. You don't have to assume that they have interest. They express they have interest, right? And then now with the whole signal stuff, we have more signals, more reference points to prioritize and activate against how we can see and understand the behaviors these people are taking to inform the follow-up and the experience that we push them into. So that's the strategy.
Yeah. So if I understand that right, would you say that let's say create, capture, accelerate, revive, and expand are more it's primarily a segmentation strategy of you're segmenting accounts into where you believe they are in terms of their level of awareness with you. But when it comes to the message that you're trying to show them, you need to have a bouquet of offers and content. And you could even at the create stage potentially throw in a high involvement sort of CTA, like a demo or something like that. You can experiment with it. Maybe your video is so compelling that someone immediately kind of resonates and decides to take that next step, right? So rather than trying to guess whether so what you're trying to assess is how aware are they about you, what is your relationship with them. So create to expand is your relationship with that account, so you're mapping that out into 5 stages. The content, you could try all kinds of mix. You don't have to kind of be very prescriptive to say in the top, in the create stage, I'll have like only awareness and nothing more involved, and so on and so forth. Did I get that right?
That's correct. And I think an important frame for people to adopt that's helped me is the best playbook is only as good until the next playbook. So I think we have a tendency to like over index and over subscribe to the latest things, and we forget to take that like curiosity and that experimenter's mindset. So for context, like with my team, I always tell them everything is an opinion until you have data to back it up as a fact. So for us, we do not hold our beliefs closely. Like we more so take the frame of we are learners, not we are the best at this. Like, because when you adopt the frame of a learner, you accept failure and you understand it's part of the process, and you're not afraid of it because you know you're not really failing if you learn something from it, right? And you grow through it. So I think a lot of people, which is always the common thing in marketing, like they want such prescription, right? And they neglect the need of exploration, right? You have to go through these things and test for yourself. I can't tell you how many accounts that I will try one thing that worked for one company in a similar industry and I'll apply it to theirs and it doesn't work, right? Or for context, like Google Ads is a good one. There's certain bid strategies that people say, like for context, like one of our accounts, their performance was awful. And all the Google reps, everyone was saying, hey, you need to increase budget, you need to switch to this automated bid strategy, etc. But because we actually understand fundamentally at the root of how this thing works, we're able to break the rules and try new things. So what we do was we realized like Google's algorithm was off and it was overinflating costs and it was not actually producing the way it wanted to. So what we did to reset the algorithm was we put the campaign on manual bidding and we forced Google to enter the auction with the bid that we wanted. And by doing that, now the company was actually showing up more prevalent in the search because they weren't overpaying on costs. They were showing up more often throughout the day. They were starting to rack up conversions again. And then once we were able to reset the algorithm, send better signals, then only we started to tailor back into an automated bid strategy. So again, like everything is subjective. You have to test, you have to see for yourself. Like, and this is the fun part about marketing, like get creative. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to like the offers and the content and the, like the KPIs you care about. Like I can't tell you how many people ask me, I'm ranting now. They'll be like, what's the best KPI? And I'm like, the best KPI is the thing that when something happens to it, it actually impacts your business. Like it's so subjective. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, should I be tracking bounce rate or should I tracking this? And I'm like, again, it's like it's a carrot versus stick. And I'm like, this is why like everyone, like if there's one thing I could leave on this earth in terms of the B2B community, it's like really understand this stuff because it's an unlock. Because now you start to see it. You start to see it as like a chessboard. You know what I mean? And then you can start to make different moves based on the board that you're and the set of conditions in which you're playing in. So long-winded answer, but yes, you're fundamentally you are correct.
Got it. Silvio, I know we have like 5 minutes right now, but we do have the rest of the framework to cover.
Oh my God,
Are
I'm so
you
sorry.
open?
I will. Yeah,
Are you open to go over by like 5 to 10 minutes? Is that all right with you?
Yeah, of course. I have another 30 minutes, so I'm good.
Yeah. So let's go ahead.
All right. So moving on is configure. So now that you're clear on your strategy, congratulations. You've got the first part dialed in. Now the next part is configuring the necessary measurement and visibility to actually understand, is that strategy, moving in the right way or not? So for context, this screenshot that you see here is an example of one of the dashboards that we built for one of our clients. And in this hypothetical example, you can see that we have spend data that's coming from the ad platforms. And then we have all of this data here that's coming from the CRM. And then we're able to see month over month, quarter over quarter, week over week, what is our actual contribution. And for everyone on the line right now, because this comes up all the time when people are saying like, well, how do you measure success? Because I feel like I can't go outside of capture because I need that last touch to drive the conversion to then, of course, drive all these other things that my leadership cares about. So we call this the paid revenue dashboard. And what it does is you're pulling your CRM data and then you're pulling the ad platform data. You need both because you want to understand not just, oh, I drove these many leads, but you want to understand what's the cost per lead, the cost per MQL, the cost per SQL, and so on and so forth, right? And you only can do that if you're pulling in the actual paid data as well. In addition to that, we like to pull in both paid, meaning like directly attributed to paid, but also organic and direct. So really what we're trying to measure is we're trying to measure the halo effect of ads, because not everybody that clicks your ads will convert, right? Good click-through rate is 2%. That means 98% of the people are gone. So for context, when we're pulling in direct, the assumption of why we're pulling in direct is because people will see our ad and then they'll just look us up directly. The reason why we're pulling in organic is because people will see our ads and then they'll go to Google and search our organic brand name, right? And then convert. So those are the sources that we care about. There are some caveats to this, but those are generally the sources we care about. And now what we're doing is we're looking at it on two frames. We're looking at it in terms of directly attributable, which is straightforward, but now we're also looking in terms of blended or influenced overall performance efficiency. And for those of you on the line, just to give you guys the quick answer here, if you have to have the lead to associate credit, what that means, I would still build these two levels of visibility so you can show leadership. Because at the end of the day, if you see pipe to spend on this level of visibility is going up month over month, quarter over quarter, that means you're getting more efficient with every dollar you're spending, right? And notice how I'm saying I'm not pulling in social media here. I'm not pulling in email. I'm not putting in referrals. It is just direct and then organic search for brand. That's it. So if I'm seeing the pipe to spend go up, then I can start to make the inference of, oh, wait a second. There's more people who are becoming aware from my ads. There's a spillover. There's this halo effect. So I can continue to do what I do. And then in addition to that, this is the executive level. So when I'm talking to VPs, et cetera, and I'm trying to get buy-in, I'm not talking about my proxy metrics unless they really care. I'm talking about this. I'm like, hey, we drove this much in last touch pipeline. We also drove this much in blended pipeline from these attributed sources. And I'm showing them the story. Now, for me as the optimizer, as the performance marketer, when I'm in my account, I have my proxy metrics that I'm using to help guide my decisions and work in a more iterative cycle, right, where I can test faster.
Got it.
So anywho, just wanted to share this because I think that comes up a lot where people are like, oh, what does the reporting look like? Da, 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 and things like that.
Yeah, I think definitely, at least on LinkedIn as a channel, like we see this all the time, right? Like you said, click-through rates are 2%. Like on LinkedIn, it's 0.5%. For the best performing ad, it's probably like 1%, right? So, but we see that a lot of the companies that we advertise to, they see our ads on LinkedIn. On the average, it takes them maybe 2 to 3 weeks of consistent ad exposure. And then we do see them on the website, right? Like we see them coming into the website. We can see in our account timeline that we've been advertising to them for a while. Then they've come to our website, they've gone to G2, they've not yet filled out a form. And then let's say the next month, they're actually like filling out a form, right? So considering the sort of non-directly attributable impact of channels such as LinkedIn, I think it's a disservice to the sort of investment that you're doing if you are sticking to like, oh, person will click the ad, come to the landing page, book a demo, then and there, right? So yeah, completely agree on that.
And 100%. And for everyone listening, there's levels. So for context, like this, I think is good for 80% of people where, especially if you have that understanding with leadership. The next level from this is exactly what like Praveen you're talking about, right? Like I want to know now, not just the pipeline effect overall in terms of the halo. I want to know the account touches. I want to be able to assign fractional credits by source. I want to drill into the content specific. Like you want another layer of granularity. And I think where people go wrong is they they jump to the tool and they don't have the foundations in place, right?
Mm.
And like ideally when you onboard that tool, it's like it's an unlock because you know what it's like before, right? And you already had these foundations in place, but you've maximized that level of efficiency. It's like to use I like to speak in analogies. It's like bodybuilders, you know, it's like why take steroids if you still have so much natural growth available? You
Mm.
know, like maximize your genetic potential first. And then from there, if you're like, hey, I really want to take this to the next level from there, well, then, okay, now then you know there's no other path for you than to get on steroids, right? And like take HGH or whatever it is. And like I kind of equate it the same way where there's so many companies where they just don't have the foundations in place and then they're jumping to the thing and then they're blaming the tool when it's like not even the tool's fault. It's like it can only work as good as the thing you give it. But anyways, I'm ranting now, so
Mm.
let's go on to the next one. So let's go on to assemble. So now that you've configured the necessary visibility, congrats, you're already ahead of like 90% of people. Now it's time to actually do the work of planning, putting together the campaigns, etc. So this is where you want to actually have a campaign plan, right? Hey, what are the audiences I'm going after? What's the daily budget look like? What are my campaign naming conventions? This is really where like a lot of the hands-on keyboard type actions go on. Very important to do because with ads, it's fascinating how it's like one of those disciplines where the difference of a click of a button can really impact things. Like click click audience expansion on LinkedIn, you'll see what I
Mm.
mean. Like there are these clicks of button situations where it's like we call them gotchas. It's like there are these gotchas that if you just don't know about, they're going to come back, right? And you're going to pay for it eventually in the stupidity tax. So this is all about assembling your campaigns and making sure that you have all the things in place. The next piece is all about learning. This one is massive. So this one is all about creating that experimentation engine. So at the end of the day, like we are not just running ads to run ads. I have to remind myself that sometimes because I just want to see how things respond. But we're running ads to like actually drive meaningful business outcomes. And at the end of the day, like you are doing things right now in your account, taking the time to formalize your thought process into the form of an experiment is very helpful because it realigns you to the purpose of the thing you're doing in the first place. And there is a huge fallacy where people do things for the sake of doing them, but they don't do them for the sake of impact. Like for context, like I see so many clients that we absorb and that we bring on. One of the easiest hacks that we do that just like it already improves performance and it's pretty immediate is we just have them do less. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but for context, like
Mm.
that 5,000 budget, 7,000 accounts example, we would just go in and we would say, hey, let's just focus on 300 accounts.
Mm.
And just by doing that alone, and again, like less campaigns, more budget per campaign, enough ads per campaign, so you can speed the velocity of testing per campaign, will allow you to learn faster. If you learn faster, that means you'll be able to make decisions sooner. If you can make decisions sooner, that'll reinforce ideally more positive outcomes. And it's just this positive flywheel, right, of learning and growth. So this all first starts with actually writing down what you're doing in the form of an experiment. So the way
Mm.
we define an experiment, and for context, like in the ad conversion community, every single week we're sharing experiments. Up until this point, we have over 130 documented experiments that we've done, and from all different kinds of like varies and areas. So for context, like I always get like pushback when I say numbers around experiments because people are like, "Oh, the experiments are so small. It's like manual bidding versus target CPA." But there is definitely like a quality and a quantity factor. It's like the example of like when you start on YouTube, it's like you need enough quantity to understand quality, right? Because your assumptions are wrong. And it's not until you
Mm.
get into the market. So for everyone listening, like just optimize for more at first. And then by optimizing for more, eventually you can optimize for better. But in the beginning, you just have to get started. So anywho, for this, the way we define an experiment is the first thing is you need a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is just a nerdy way of saying, what is your assumption? Like, what do you believe to be true? And essentially the statement that we like to use is if we do this, then I believe this as measured by this. So if we run non-brand campaigns on Google Ads bidding on attribution software, then I believe we can reach high intent searchers that are in market right now looking for a solution as measured by more demo requests created in HubSpot. That's an example of framing that hypothesis statement. And then from there, the next thing you need is you need your control and you need your variant. So your control is the thing that you're starting with, and the variant is the thing you're testing. There's different forms of experimentation. I'm not to get too off derailed, but fundamentally, it's usually A/B testing is what you're going to be doing most of the time. And essentially, you want to make sure it's very clear. Hey, here's my control. So in this case, it's my campaign with, non-brand keywords, right? And my other one could be nothing, right? In this case, because you're starting from zero. And then the next piece here is the sample. So what's the start and end date of how long you want to run the experiment? And then once you run the experiment, you review the data after the experiment deadline. If you need more time, you extend the due date. But the point is you check back in and you close the cycle. You close the cycle. And then what you do is you write all your results of what you saw in terms of your sample size. Here's my spend. This was how many meetings we actually got or not. And then the most important part, my takeaways. And you write your takeaways. Okay, there's been experiments that I thought would crush, but they didn't. Like one that comes to my mind right now is on Microsoft ads. Microsoft owns LinkedIn. So when you run Microsoft search ads, you actually have the ability to use LinkedIn targeting on your search campaigns. And I was like so excited. I'm like, oh my God, like this is gonna crush. I can exclude by these job functions and I can do this and I can do that, whatever. And when I got too narrow, it actually didn't work. So my hypothesis was false, right? But on the flip side, when I just used job function exclusions, I actually saw a positive impact on my results. So this is the fun thing about like ads is like small things can lead to big wins, but of course, big wins can lead to even bigger wins, right? So anywho, when it comes to actually documenting your experiments, these are the things to think about. This example here is the example that I give away in the course.
Yeah. So Sylvia, I have a question here. So one thing I have noticed is these experiments may not be global truths, right? It may work for one customer. Do you see that happen? That yes, this experiment, like the let's say the big one that you took as an example, do you almost always see that it works for some customers, it doesn't work for others? So it almost always has to be client specific. Or do you see some where, like for example, the LinkedIn audience network probably kind of that might be like more globally applicable, but so yeah, do you see that difference that what you find as a result may not be true across advertisers or across customers?
Of course. Yeah, of course. This is actually one of the funnest parts about being in an agency is you get to validate that hypothesis across different populations. So for context, like we'll see this experiment did really well for this one performance marketer and this one account. And then from there, we'll take it a step further and then we'll see, is there an opportunity to implement that same hypothesis in other industries and other environments and seeing, oh, okay, after these, if it wins for one, awesome. If it wins for two, that's interesting. If it wins for three, this is something special, and that's the fun thing about like the agency side is you have that exposure. So 100% they don't all work, and that's why you have to test, and this is why you have to take best practices with a grain of salt, because there's always nuance in marketing, right? The best answer in marketing is usually it depends.
Yeah, so I think the takeaway for our audience would be there are these 130 documented experiments in the ad conversion community. That would be a great starting point, but you want to check suitability and applicability for yourself. So it's not that what worked there might work immediately for you. It's a starting point, but you have to test for yourself and see what's really working well for you, and then have a log of what has worked, so that you don't have to go repeat back everything that you've kind of made tried out in the past.
100%, and it doesn't have to be as fancy as this. This example is like an Airtable. If you do want this, I give away this template, but like. The cool thing too is you can really create an experimentation engine. So for context, like in this Airtable example, Airtable, you can integrate with Slack. So once you complete the experiment, you can also send Slack alerts with the completed experiment. This is really cool because you can get so much buy-in with leadership. I always tell people in the community, I'm like, if you want more budget, communicate more often. You would be shocked, just like by communicating more often, the things you're learning with the people that matter, how much trust that builds. Because whether it's wrong or right, it's just true, is we perceive communication as effort. So meaning this happens all the time in the agency. If a client doesn't hear from you, they think you're not doing anything, which may be true, maybe not true, right? So like points of communication are perceived as value, which builds more trust and goodwill, right? And it just works everywhere.
No, I believe this works even in-house, right? So I think one of the things I tell my marketing team as well is that it's not that communication is about visibility or something like that. In the absence of communication and the experiments that you're trying and what you're learning, the problem is the measurement criteria only becomes leads, revenue, and pipeline, right? But there is so much color to what the team does every day in terms of everything that they're trying, everything that they're learning, so that we are building that muscle of working better, right? But all of that remains within the marketing team and doesn't really go out, right? So
Yep.
I completely agree that better communication, even internally, even at a very early stage like ourselves, just helps you align with the rest of the org in terms of what's happening inside your function.
Totally. And especially in the bad times. The
Yeah,
worst thing you can do is not communicate. Your leaders get caught by surprise. That's the worst situation you can be in. Like it should be if things are bad, they knew at the very beginning, and that when it's
yeah.
the worst that it is at its climax, there's no surprise and it's just problem solving. But let's move forward.
Yeah.
But just for everyone here, you guys could just use a simple Google Doc if you don't want to use something as fancy as this. But the point is that you're actually taking the time to write down why you're doing what you're doing, and you're thinking about what you're doing. It might seem slower at first, but over time, you'll actually move a lot faster. All right, so the next one is expand. So this is all around, okay, you're running these experiments, you've got the strategy, you've got the infrastructure for measurement, you've assembled your campaigns correctly, you're learning from said experimentation. Now, how do you get more budget from stakeholders, right? Which we kind of touched on a little bit here. And this lorem ipsum example is just like a slide example of like a presentation you might give to a stakeholder. But essentially, the main thing I want to communicate that I brought up earlier is when it comes to securing budget from stakeholders, it all comes down to certainty. The way I like to frame it is at the end of the day, your leaders want to hit a goal, right? This goal matters for said reasons. And the thing that they go to bed at night worrying about is, are we going to hit this goal, right? It's the thing that they think about constantly. And for everyone listening that doesn't own your own business, as a founder myself, like you might go to your work and you think about it 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day. The founder is thinking about it 24/7, even when they're not trying to. It's just we can't turn it off. It's always in our mind. So with that being said, we really care about hitting these goals. And when it comes to hitting these goals, if you could present to your founder, your CEO, or your leadership that you have a plan that can actually help them get there, the only gap of them agreeing or disagreeing with you is their level of certainty in said plan. So always think about that, because when you're putting together your presentation, it allows you to put yourself in their shoes, where you can ask yourself, what are all the holes in my plan? What are the risks associated with it, right? So then you can start to think about those risks, stress test your own plan. So then by the time you actually pitch it to your leadership, you've thought about the downsides, right? For example, hey, let's do an ungated strategy because I believe XYZ, right? You could also use a hypothesis framework here, right? Very helpful to pitch this. And then you yourself think about, what are the downsides of this strategy, right? What can go wrong? Well, how do we know if we're successful? How do we measure our leading indicators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And you can start like rank all this out. So when you make the pitch, you are solid. And then from there, you also have to think about like easily reversible decisions. So for context, like if I ask somebody to bet the company on this experiment, it's going to take a lot more certainty, right? But if I just ask them for a smidge of the marketing budget, right, where, like just 10% of the budget, where like the other 80% is still on the things that we know are guaranteed winners, then it's going to be a lot easier to sell. So these are the frames to think about when you're putting this together. And I think we get too caught up in the slides and like the templates and the formats. And really, in terms of like teaching you how to fish versus giving you the fish, what I really want you to think about is like, how do you tell the story that can create certainty in the eyes of your leadership so that they feel obligated to say hell yes and not no?
Yeah, I think those points that you mentioned, which is mapping out the risk and the reward and the level of investment, right? So I think that really makes sense because in many cases, what happens is, like as you said, making these decisions with half information, like even like in factors, like the marketing team actually rolls up into me, and but even when they're coming to me with like ideas, right? So it is hard for me to go like very detailed as well. So I'm looking to them to say, hey, tell me this is the risk, this is what we need, and if it works out, this is what will come through. And it makes it so much easier to commit to those decisions as compared to, okay, let's do like a deep dive and map it out, and it just slows down the decision making process, right? So putting it out in a framework like this, calling out the investment risk reward hypothesis would just kind of make everything go faster, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. So that's the scale framework. So that's how you go from zero to hero on actually, putting this all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, I wanted to kind of add about like all of the things that you mentioned around mapping all your touch points, including your LinkedIn ads touch points, website visits, maybe G2 signals, like they're checking out your review platform, emails that your sales team is sending, or calls that your sales team is making. One of the things that Factors does is uh, brings it together into like this really beautiful sort of timeline where you have all your data from all of your sort of marketing interactions. You can even upload like data sets for events and others in the form of like an easy to upload file. And then it gives you all of those in like a single sort of timeline, allows you to kind of score these accounts, figure out which signals are really working for you in the sense of their ability to kind of indicate that they are a very good proxy metric for moving those accounts to the next stage, right? So everything that Silvio mentioned in terms of TAM mapping, moving accounts from one stage to the other, and just reporting on all of this is something that Factors kind of does out of the box. And it's something that we use for ourselves and for over 300 our customers and a few mutual customers with ad conversion as well. So if this sort of a view is something that you feel would be helpful for your sort of marketing efforts, then that's something that we've kind of solved for already.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's all the slides we've got.
Yeah. So Sylvia, I had one last question for you, and maybe we can end with that. So you mentioned that you're testing out 6 channels. You talked about LinkedIn, we talked about Google, Meta, Reddit. I wanted to check. So where do you see that some channels work in some cases? How do you actually leverage each channel? That's something that we did not cover. And something that I also did not hear you mention was around like sort of display advertising, right? So I have a lot of customers who say LinkedIn is very expensive, so let me actually go buy programmatic display ads through a display advertising platform. Uh, what is your experience with one generally about each of these native platforms, and then display ads as a separate sort of effort?
Yeah. So just to unpack this, in terms of channels across the 5 stages, basically there are, not to get too into the weeds here, but there are certain channels that are stronger for certain stages, fundamentally speaking. But also within certain channels, depending on the audience targeting you're using, you could also be across different stages. So for context, like generally speaking, if we're talking the create stage, the channels that usually work best here are the channels that have great distribution costs. So think things like LinkedIn. It's definitely more expensive, but it's still great in the grand scheme of things. The level of targeting you have available and the quality of said targeting is incredible. In addition to that, channels like YouTube do really well in create because you can, again, really low cost of distribution. Channels like Twitter do great in create. I know that one's always a mixed bag in terms of feedback, but they do great in create because, again, low cost of distribution. Channels like Reddit can also do well in create as well, especially because with Reddit, you have the ability to target based on context and like certain subreddits that people are on. So even Google ads could work well in create if you're bidding on like content related keywords. So again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. But generally speaking, channels like LinkedIn, like Meta, like YouTube, like Twitter, like Reddit, these are the channels that usually have the best effectiveness, right? TikTok also can work well if you're like more of a B2C type SaaS. It can work really well for you as well. But these are the kind of channels that I'm usually thinking about when I'm kind of going through that order of process. And then for capture, it's typically remarketing. So that could be across these different social networks. It's usually paid search because again, they're searching this thing. It's just showing up. It's paid review websites like Capterra or Software Advice or GetApp. And paid review, by the way, is a whole paid strategy in itself. I was at this one company that was selling to maintenance workers, and we had a six-figure strategy just through paid review. We had so much success with one paid review site that we started sourcing other vendor sites. And there's like so many of these like little niche sites you've never heard of, but they get, a decent amount of traffic, and you can validate it with SimilarWeb and see. But anywho, paid review sites, that's also really strong here. Remarketing is really strong here. And then from there, I would also say like within the channels, there's a level of data too, like with the signal stuff. But generally channels, that's what comes to mind. Display, if I was going to put it in here, I would put it in create as well. It can be strong in terms of if you have a really good DSP that you're using for advertising. So for context, like when I was at Metadata, one of the things that I was working on was helping actually build the display product, and like being a part of the DSP, brokering that relationship, like seeing the back end of the black box. And I don't think people really realize how many things are going against you when you're running display. So for context, like there's this thing called ads.txt, and it's a snippet of text that publishers put on their website to verify that they're an authorized publisher. And you would never know that, right? So you could be buying inventory from like unverified publishers. So there's like all these little things that unless you truly have a DSP, like StackAdapt or something like this, AdLib is a good one too if you're on a low budget, where you can control more of the variables. I personally wouldn't touch it. I think you're better off with LinkedIn. I think when I hear people say LinkedIn are too expensive, it's kind of a red flag for me because I'm thinking they haven't nailed the targeting. Because again, the impression itself should be valuable. And LinkedIn is the only channel right now that can get you at least 95% of the way there.
Yeah.
Because
I think, that whole idea of it is expensive, but then yes, it might be, but then what are you getting in return? A brand safe environment, precise targeting, professional sort of audience, right? So the fact that yes, you might get on programmatic display at 1/3 the cost or half the cost, but then if 50% of the inventory is anyways fraudulent, your ROI kind of goes away from that arbitrage, right? So I guess that's what I keep telling my clients as well. Like if you do not have like a proper strategy in place, then probably if you're just looking at it as CPM, then probably it is expensive. But then you have to kind of balance it out as like what are you getting in return?
And to really like pull in that thread for people to really understand all the things that are going on when you're running ads on the open internet outside of these walled gardens. When you're running display ads, remember like taking a step back to like when we talked about strategy, what we're trying to do and create, right, is we are trying to create a great experience so we can build brand affinity and trust. How we tell our story matters. When you're running ads on display, think about the placements you have available and the types of media you have available. 300 by 250, 160 by 600, right? These placements are also, where are they on the page themselves? Are they front and center? No, like they're off to the side, disregarded, etc. So you also have to take this into consideration of like, and also like, how often does your ICP actually go outside of LinkedIn and visit these websites? How often are they on Yahoo Finance, right? Or MSN or whatever the case might be, right? Like, how often are they actually watching things on their streaming devices if you're running connected TV? I definitely think programmatic is strong and there's a place for it. It's actually like something that we want to investigate more, but we just haven't gone too deep yet at that conversion. But I think of it more as a supporting channel, not as the starting channel. And if you can't get LinkedIn to work, Meta's not going to magically work for you. Programmatic's not going to magically work for you. LinkedIn is like, again, if you know you can get in front of the right person and they're just not responding in the way that you want, then fundamentally you have a strategy issue, not a placement issue.
Got it. Understood. Yeah, it's either a messaging problem or it's a product market fit problem. It's one of those, but you are reaching the right person. I guess that's a. I know I know I took a lot more time than what we had initially planned for, Silvio. Thanks a lot for doing this session. I think it was extremely valuable for a lot of the audience. If they have any questions, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Silvio Perez. And if you guys want to dive more into like the frameworks we talked about, then definitely check us out at Conversion and take our courses. All of them are free. So it's like one opt-in, you get our LinkedIn, Google, etc. We call it the best opt-in of your life. So come check it out. And then for those of you that want to go deeper, you can come visit us in the community.
All right. Thanks, Silvio. Thanks a lot, everyone, for staying up and listening to the session. I hope it was useful. And if there are any questions for either Silvio or me, please do comment, and maybe it kind of gets us to do one more session based on the questions that we get. Thanks a lot, everyone. That's it for the day. Bye.
See ya.